Hi, welcome to Donna's Kitchen, where it's no corn, no soy. And today we're going to make a caramel spread that goes along with some candies that I like to make for the holidays. Perfect for gifts or just having. So first we're going to start with the caramel sauce. You can make it a sauce or you can make it a spread. If you add more flour to your recipe, it'll become thicker like a spread, like peanut butter. If you add less, then it'll be thin like a syrup. Okay, so I have 1 tablespoon of flour and my brown sugar. This is half a cup firmly packed brown sugar. I'm going to mix these up with my handy dandy whisk. So I'm going to add the water to it and then cook it on the stove. And once it starts to incorporate, then I'll go ahead and I'll add my half and half and my butter. 1/3 add water, just water. And then I'm also going to add my 2 tablespoons of my sweet nectar. I usually add salt to this recipe, but because the candies that I'm going to be making have salted pretzels in them, I won't need the salt. I don't want to have too much salt in my recipe. So for that purpose, I will not be adding the salt to this mixture. Okay, so for our caramel sauce, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the stove to a low to medium heat. And I'm going to whisk it. And as I scrape the bottom of it, you can feel the thickness from the nectar. And once it starts to warm up a little more, I'm going to go ahead and add my butter and my half and half. Most recipes tell you not to stir your caramel. In my recipe, I say stir it as much as you want. And make sure you scrape the bottom so that way you don't scorch your pan. I'm going to add my half and half. Now we want to bring this to a boil. And once it's boiling, we want it to boil for about 2 minutes. And then we'll take it off the heat. And once we take it off the heat, then we add our vanilla to it. This would also be the time that if you were adding salt, this is when you would be adding your salt to your mixture. But since we're going to be making candies that already have salt in them, we don't need that. Okay, now our caramel sauce is starting to boil, so it has to boil for 2 minutes, which I set the timer for. And as it boils, it will thicken. Keep stirring it while it's boiling so you won't scorch your pan. And then once it's done boiling, you take it off the heat. Then you add your vanilla, and then let it cool. Once it is cool at room temperature, then you can use it for anything you choose. Okay, I've turned my heat off. It's boiled for 2 minutes. I have my vanilla. I'm going to go ahead and add that in. This is pure vanilla that I like to use for several reasons. There's nothing in it but pure vanilla. And then once you mix it in, this is what it should look like for a spread. And as it cools, it will thicken more. So now we'll just let it sit here on the stove and cool while we go ahead and make our candies. Creamy Pretzel Treats is a candy that I created based off, there's a candy that is called Take 5, and I absolutely fell so in love with this candy that I figured there's got to be a way to make it, and I figured it out, and we're going to show you how it's made. It's super easy. The caramel sauce is in the freezer chilling right now. That'll be one of the layers for later on, but this candy is layered. The bottom layer is pretzel. On top of that is peanut butter. On top of that is crushed peanuts. On top of that is the caramel sauce, and then we dip it in chocolate. Okay, so Elizabeth,
yeah.
I'm gonna have you take the peanuts and crush them.
I have a question.
I poured them in a bag for you, and I have a rolling pin, and you just smush, 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 smush. Go ahead and do that. While you're doing that, I'm going to take the pretzels and put the peanut butter on them. Now, the broken ones are for eating. Could you really quickly hand me the peanut butter?
Yeah. Here, Mom.
Okay. Now, this recipe I love because it does not go in the oven at all. You're not baking anything. You're not having to heat up the house if it's a hot day. And in between the layers, you put it in the fridge or the freezer depending on the time of year it is. What you're doing is you're taking the peanut butter, about that much, and spreading it onto your peanut butter. And this is your first layer. And you're going to do as many as you want. I usually try to do about 30, and these are great for any occasion. They're also great for gifts for like Christmas or just having around the house. So I usually try to make sure that my peanut butter is on the square but not falling off the square. And they're really good. Absolutely amazing. Everybody who has tried these absolutely has fallen in love, just like I have. So thank you to the candy makers out there for inspiration. Because I think sometimes we all need a little inspiration in the kitchen.
I need to help Fudge.
Another tip is when you're putting these on your plate, space them out a little bit so they won't stick together, because it's easy to bump them, especially when you get to your chocolate layer. You don't want them to get stuck together. So go ahead and take a small amount and sprinkle it on top of the peanut butter.
Anyone?
All of them.
Uh-oh.
It's alright. Here, let's put the bag right here.
Yeah.
This is just the second layer that goes on top of the peanut butter. And the salt in that is in the pretzels and in the peanuts is why we don't put the salt in the caramel topping. So now I'm going to go ahead and take the candies and put them in the freezer for about 10 minutes. Then they should be ready for the caramel spread. And make sure, there we go. And make sure that when you put them in the freezer that is on something level so they won't tip and spill and make a big mess in your freezer. Okay, let's go ahead and see if our candies are ready to come out. Now the best way to check to see if they're done is if the nuts are on there pretty firmly, which they're a little bit wobbly, but it should be fine. So I've gone ahead and I have my wax paper on a cookie sheet. I just sprayed a little bit of water on the bottom of it to hold the paper in place. And what we do is we take the very cold candy along with the spread that we made earlier, and you can see how thick it's gotten. And dabble about that much on there. And then after I have all of these coated, they'll go back in the freezer. Once it's frozen pretty solid, then I'll go ahead and make my chocolate sauce, and we'll dip these in the chocolate, and they'll be fully coated. Oops. And that's why we do it over the pan, so if it drips, it drips. These are a bit messy, but oh gosh, they're fun to make. It's a little bit tedious, but the final, your final product will be well worth it. Oops. And that's why we do it over the pan, so if it drips into the pan. These are a bit messy, but oh gosh, they're fun to make. It's a little bit tedious, but the final, your final product will be well worth it. I don't have an exact measurement. I just want to try to make sure that the peanuts are coated. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take this into my deep freeze, which is in the garage, and I don't think you want to come with me. But these are going to sit until they are firm. The caramel needs to be firmly set for two reasons. One, I don't want a goopy mess. And two, when it comes to the dipping process of the chocolate with the candy already being frozen, then it'll harden faster and it'll set beautifully. So now that I'm done with using the caramel sauce in this particular recipe, this is the time where I'm going to go ahead and add some salt, probably about 1/4 teaspoon, and mix it in really well. And then I'll go ahead, put it in a container and set it in the fridge for me to use. I can put it on ice cream or whatever, and it'll be ready for me. Okay, I just took out my candies out of the freezer, and I have another pan here. I got it wet with water, and I'm putting more wax paper on it. We're going to go ahead and melt the chocolate, dip the candies in the chocolate, and set them on this other pan here, so that way they'll set up and they won't be in a pan with caramel already on it. I'm going to put this in the microwave, 30 seconds to start. I'll stir it up, and if it's still a little clumpy, then I'll add 10 more seconds at a time, because chocolate burns very easily in a microwave. So you do your initial 30 seconds and then 10-second increments after that to prevent burning or scorching of your chocolate. This could take up to about a minute, but you have to check it in between, because as you can see, it is a little bit melted on the bottom, but the top didn't get melted at all, so we got to put it back in. Today I've decided to use the semi-sweet chocolate chips. Usually I use the milk chocolate, but today I wanted to go a little bit different. So I try to use a fork to put it on top of the chocolate that's been melted. Then I take the spoon and cover it up. Make sure it's completely covered. Then I take my fork, pull it out, wipe off the excess. And then once I have my tray full, I will go ahead and put it back in the fridge or the freezer. Yes, I tasted the chocolate. I had to. I'm not at a restaurant, I'm at home. The benefits of cooking at home. Okay. So I put it on top so that way it's easier to find when I go to uncover it. Make sure it's fully covered on all 4 sides. And I take my fork, scoop it out, and I'll probably end up using not only this entire batch, but probably the rest of the bag of chips. Make sure they're spaced in between because you don't want them to stick together. I just added more chocolate chips and melted them again. You do have to work quickly with your chocolate because if you don't, your chocolate will start to crack and it won't look pretty. And you want your candy to look pretty, especially if you're presenting it to somebody for a gift. So don't forget to put the candy on top and put a scoop of chocolate over top of it. Use your fork, pull it out, get off the excess, and there you are. Let it set. And these are so simple to make. It's just waiting for them to set up in between that seems to take the longest time. But they're so simple. You just put them in the freezer. At this stage, the last stage, you will be putting it in the refrigerator because you're going to be serving them or getting them ready for a gift. Wouldn't you like to have one? And just look inside. You can see the layers. These candies were inspired by the Take 5. These are my own version, creamy pretzel treats. Say that 3 times fast. So good. Don't forget to subscribe, and tell me all about your adventures with cooking. Have a great day. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye.